I'm Nina Griffin, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel. Today, we'll talk about the forecast for October. And first, I wanted to say thank you to all of my patrons. I really appreciate all of your support. If you would like access to this forecast about a week early, usually it's available to the general public the first of the month, you can join my group of patrons. You can go to patreon.com/Nina Griffin. You'll also have access to exclusive videos that are never made available to the public. There is a monthly Q&A about astrology and magic. And of course, the monthly magical elections PDF is available through Patreon as well. Now, let's get started. So the themes in October are, I would call it, on the one hand, this is a month where we are marking time. The conflicts that really flared up in September are continuing. A lot of confrontations between the old and the new, between power and resistance, all these different oppositions that we see in the world. At the same time, everybody knows that the big shift is really going to occur in December, when Jupiter and Saturn change signs for good. They move into Aquarius, and they move into their conjunction, which ushers in several hundred years of Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in air signs. So my thought here is that yes, we have conflicts, but ultimately it's a little bit like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, to use a popular metaphor. In other words, I think what we're seeing here are conflicts that ultimately become just not very important in the long run. They may seem extremely important now, and they may change things in the short to medium term, but in the medium to long term, really, it's not going to matter all that much. A lot of the changes that will be ushered in very slowly starting in December are going to sweep away a lot of the things that we thought were important in October and November, and even the first few months perhaps of 2021, before we get used to what we think is going to be the new normal for a very long time to come. What we also see in October is that Jupiter and Saturn have gone direct by this point. So there is a sense that events, especially big societal things, but also in our personal lives, will happen a little bit more easily now. For better or worse, in October, we're going to have Mars retrograde and part of the month, Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde can definitely throw a wrench into the works, but that's only about a 3-week period usually, so it's not something that makes a huge impact on things in the long term. And then as that straightens out and as Mars goes direct in the middle of November, whatever is going to happen, all those big changes are really going to start becoming apparent even in late November, and then of course in December for sure. Let's talk about October week by week. October 1st, we see the full moon at 9 Aries. And this is really, it's an interesting full moon. It's cardinal, of course, so it plays into all the cardinal action that we've been seeing most of this year. It makes a wide square to Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn, of course, also Pluto if you use Pluto. And really, full moons always give us some sense of culmination, but they do color events, or they set themes for the next 2 weeks until the new moon. And so we can think of the following 2 weeks as, yes, being pretty typical in terms of the conflict, things we've already seen in September. We're going to see those similar themes play out in October as well, certainly the first half of the month. Now, what's interesting is that October 2nd, the very next day, Venus enters Virgo after having traversed Leo. Now, when Venus enters Virgo, literally at 0 Virgo, she conjoins the royal star Regulus, called the Heart of the Lion. And what's interesting about that is that any planet conjoining Regulus is at the point of victory. Regulus gives victory over all opponents. As many, or perhaps even most fixed stars, it eventually tends to lead to loss of power and a fall from power. However, at this point, Venus is going to be at her apex. In some ways, she is, even though she is the planet of love and connections, she is also going to be sort of militarily and publicly powerful. So what's interesting though, at the same time, of course, Venus entering Virgo also enters her detriment, but also her triplicity by day. So we just have a lot of weird pluses and minuses for Venus going on at once as she enters Virgo. So it's a complex placement. Overall, I would say that this is not a placement overall favorable for women in public-facing roles, for example. So any women that tend to be in the headlines are going to have some challenges, but it's also combined with being very powerful. But maybe that's the nature in some ways of being a woman in the public eye, right? You get a lot of criticism, perhaps just for being a woman in the public eye. So I think that's a lot of what we're going to see. In the practical sense, I think a lot of women who may have wanted to take over some kind of position of power at this time are going to be forced, while Venus is in Virgo, so about 25 days until the end of October, they're going to be forced to have to wait and take a back seat. When Venus enters Libra, though, about 25 days later, they get to come into their own. But again, by entering Libra, they're now entering this whole what I call the cardinal mess. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So in general, I would say that this Venus entering Virgo has a lot to do with women entering a position of power. You could think of it as the front hallway or the front entrance to power, but still having to wait and having to act kind of subservient, right? Venus entering its detriment. Venus being very modest and sort of virginal, which is really not what Venus likes to be. So in a way, it's an act, but it's a very common one when we look at how women are expected to act in the public eye. The second week of October, we're looking at October 9th, Mars will square Pluto at 22 degrees Aries and 22 Capricorn. So this is the second of Mars's three hits to the planets in Capricorn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn, while Mars is retrograde. So the effects of Mars aspecting these planets are more subdued than when he was direct, because a planet retrograde will not be nearly as powerful as when direct. If you have watched my Mars square Saturn videos, you will find that there's a strong emphasis on Mars going direct. And when Mars goes direct, especially the first time when he aspected Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn, he was kind of like charging against this Saturnian wall, thinking it was just going to collapse when he hit it. But of course it didn't, because Saturn is much better positioned than Mars this fall, as I explained many times in these videos. So what I think we're going to see is when Mars hits these planets again when he's retrograde, he's already experienced failure the first time. Now, Mars in Aries is not really learning lessons, right? That's just not what Mars in Aries does, and it's not going to be what he does this fall. But anybody who identifies with this Mars in Aries, who has that kind of, tear it down energy, this is where they try again to break things down, and they fail, right? This is the second attempt. This is them charging at the wall yet again, and of course failing. This time because Mars is retrograde and all these planets are now going to be direct or close to being direct, such as Saturn, such as Jupiter, and so on. It's going to be a little bit of a chastening experience. So I look forward to seeing how that plays out in person and on the world stage. October 11th is the Sun squaring Jupiter at 18 Libra Capricorn. And Jupiter is associated with the legal system. So if you're looking at kind of public events, a lot of things happen now that are related to the courts. As I mentioned in last month's video, Mercury square Jupiter was going to bring important developments in the legal world. And what happened here in the US in September, when Mercury square Jupiter is the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg died. And so here we see conflict between some part of the government, which is the Sun, and the legal system. So I'm expecting some kind of power tussles, power games, a lot of posturing, that kind of stuff. On the personal level, Sun square Jupiter can bring the same energies into our lives, right? So there could be a tendency for us to become much more into posturing and into making grand gestures, which may or may not pan out in reality. So week 3 is extremely active. It's really the most active week out of all of October. So October 12th, Jupiter will sextile Neptune. And usually, this is not a major important aspect, but what does happen is that this tends to help the stock market, I've noticed, and also the arts. It's a combination of what I would call starry-eyed optimism, starry-eyed creativity. It's especially because this year it's combined, same day, October 12th, we have Venus sextile Mercury at 11 Virgo and 11 Scorpio. And this sextile between these two planets, because they move at approximately the same rates, has been an orb for a long time. And it's a culmination of a very long process. So what I could see happening around October 12th is a beautiful artistic moment. It really highlights the marriage of skill, Mercury, and beauty or an aesthetic sense, which is Venus. So when you combine that with the Jupiter sextile Neptune happening, around this time I would expect there to be quite a significant artistic achievement becoming public. Whether it's a new film, some kind of new painting exhibition, there's something quite beautiful and special happening around this time. Obviously, on a personal level, it's a great opportunity to create and put into the world something beautiful yourself. So obviously, these influences can work on the personal as well as on the social level. October 13th, though, the Sun opposes Mars. We're back to our cardinal mess, and that will be at 21 Libra and 21 Aries. So again, on the political scene, it's further conflict between one branch of the government to another. Mars, of course, represents the people who carry weapons for a living. So you've got like soldiers, you've got police, anybody who's in charge of like enforcing the law are going to be Mars people. Sun opposing that means there's some conflict between them and a source of authority, right? So like the king is at odds with the army, to put it in like medieval or Renaissance terms, right? That's the kind of thing. On the personal level, obviously, we could see some kind of conflict with authority. So probably, unless you really want that, now is a time to not get into those conflicts. At the same time, same day, Mercury retrogrades at 11 degrees Scorpio. Now, Scorpio is a Mars-ruled sign. So a lot of what we're going to be seeing here around October 13th is some kind of conflict that becomes very entrenched very quickly, where each side just sort of sits down and refuses to budge. It won't be like that forever, but you could see that dynamic starting now. So unless you want to enter that kind of dynamic, I would just recommend stay well away from any conflicts at this point, because if you do enter into anything like that, you may have to deal with it and be committed to that position for a very long time. October 16th, we have the new moon at 23 Libra, so this will color the next couple of weeks. And 23 Libra is the benefic star Spika. She rules food, healing, and blessings, all the things that humans need to live. It's really the best fixed star out there because it has symbolism that's specific to humans. It's about helping humanity thrive. Most fixed stars just help humanity, suffer and die. So, however, of course, the downside of this new moon on Spika is that it is very closely square to Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto in Capricorn. So the next 2 weeks' theme, especially on the social or societal level, will be literally about giving people bread. Like, if I had to find a physical object related to Spika, it is bread. Now, what we could see, like in the US, is a revival of the stimulus package discussions in Congress, which if it does happen, I think it could happen at the end of October, or we might have to literally wait until all the visible planets are direct in mid-November. So it's something that, as I had said in my previous videos way back this summer, I think it was like in July or something, when we have this stimulus package, I thought it might get past maybe September, maybe October, but I knew it was going to be a long time. And this new moon tells us, yes, it's going to become an important issue, but I am not convinced that it does get passed even now. I'm just saying at least it becomes raised as an issue. Now, October 18th, the Sun will square Saturn at 25 Libra in Capricorn. So again, the sun is very close to Spika, but it's running into this very powerful opposition, but tension, I should say, from Saturn, who is square. So this is a day when the themes of this fall, power and resistance and the resulting conflict, come into sharp relief. Mars will square Jupiter on the same day at 19 Aries and Capricorn. So again, Mars is now realizing that the Capricorn wall will be a tougher nut to crack than Mars had thought. So he tries again now, again with a lot of bluster, because that's what Mars does, but with little success. And so I would urge you to not to take October too seriously. You know, things are going to be very, like the parties are really going to be beating their chest and all that to show how powerful they are and all that kind of thing. But in reality, a lot of it is going to be just posturing. And again, a lot of this gets swept away by the end of the year. You know, it's a lot of these things that we thought were so serious and so forever are really not going to be anything more than shadows. Now, week 4, we get to October 19th, and Venus trines Jupiter at 19 Virgo and Capricorn. And this is my favorite metaphor of the whole month, where you have two debilitated benefics, right? Venus in fall, Jupiter in fall. They meet in straitened circumstances, like two former millionaires running into each other at a soup kitchen. So it's a nice social event, but neither of them has a lot to contribute. However, on the personal level, I think this is a really lovely combination for success and profit from earthly, tangible things like farming or real estate. And this is why I am hopeful that something will be done to help the people who are currently not having a lot of food, they don't have a lot of money, who are really struggling through this new pandemic economy in 2020. I am hopeful that Venus trine Jupiter is going to help them get something to survive. It is a very food and sustenance-oriented combination in the earth signs. 5 days later, October 24th, Venus then trines Saturn at 25 Virgo and Capricorn. So this combination is very pragmatic but quite charming, and it's a really great opportunity to cooperate with others to build things of lasting value. So despite all the drama that went on the previous few weeks, this is actually kind of a nice week. Like, people are cooperating, things are happening in a positive way. October 25th, Mercury, which is retrograde, will conjoin the Sun at 2 degrees Scorpio. So Mercury conjoins the Sun in their inferior conjunction, and what happens is Mercury becomes a day planet now. And all those secretive Mercury and Scorpio activities, including, I'd like to point out, any hidden disease or infection, because Scorpio rules toxins, any kind of secretive business machinations, because of course Mercury is business, will soon come to the surface in a few days' time as Mercury and the Sun separate and Mercury becomes visible. So I'd like to point that out because it's an important part of the Mercury cycle. October 27th, we have a couple of important events, and really it's the last very significant day of the month. Venus will enter Libra. As you can see, she zipped through the signs very quickly. She gains tremendous strength now. And I think that we will see a very powerful push to fill that Supreme Court seat around this time. I think, a woman is going to become very prominent in the legal or business arenas. It could be obviously related to the court, but it could be other scenarios as well. And so this thing that I was talking about, where as Venus was passing through Virgo, the woman had to sort of be in the background and act like, she wasn't much of anything. Suddenly Venus enters Libra and whoosh, she comes into her full power. She is fully displayed and shown for who she is, for better or for worse. The same day, Mercury, who is retrograde, enters Libra from the end of Libra, right? So Venus enters Libra from 0 Libra, Mercury retrograde enters Libra from Scorpio. So because of this, we return to a previous story. And I think we will be back talking about this Supreme Court seat that was vacated by Justice Ginsburg when Mercury in Libra squared Jupiter in September. Now, for anybody on a personal level, this day is going to be a big deal. Libra rules, of course, the judicial system, but I think it actually even more so rules business. People in the West always think that the scales are the scales of justice, but in fact, in the East, the scales, the symbol of Libra, are related to the merchant's scales. That is the set of scales that most people would have much more interaction with on a daily basis historically. Whenever you go to buy anything, there is going to be a set of scales there. So what's important to recognize here is that the business interests in this country, and probably in a lot of countries, are going to suddenly become resurgent. They are going to have an even stronger voice in the public discussion than they had had before. On a personal level, I think this is a good time if there's something that you are selling, or if you are going to be promoting something of yours kind of in a commercial sense. I think that starting October 27th, although perhaps you may want to wait until Mercury is direct again, starting October 27th is a period where you'll be able to succeed in business, where you'll be able to promote yourself and you'll be able to sell things if that is what you want. All right, thank you very much for watching. I'm Nina Griffin, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel.